and at least for me as an outsider, someone who's not a Sleigh Bells fan, I see a lot of the qualities in their music maintaining over their 3 records. So I mean, if you were really attracted to their first, I don't see why their third one wouldn't also appeal to you. But to go on to sort of doing a negative review, I mean, I think like the most intense, I can't say it was the most negative reaction, but I think one of the more intense moments for me was like when I did a review for My Beautiful Dark Twisted Fantasy, and that wasn't even my most negative review. It wasn't even a negative review. I mean, I didn't like some of the songs on it, but I didn't say I thought the record was horrible. But everyone's reaction to the record, like sort of just, it was the most negative reaction to anything I had done a video of so far. And that was like when my, and doing that review actually like brought this huge influx of viewers that I never had before. And, it also like caused my audience to turn on me and everything. And and then it's sort of like I had to do like soul searching for a day, and it was like like toward the beginning of December, so like things were calming down, so I just like had a day to do that. And then after sort of the next year started, any and all negative reaction to what I had said had just like, I mean, people still ask me about that album occasionally and whether or not I still feel that way, but people aren't still like hit me up and being like, "You're an asshole, Fantano. You're dead."
Really?
Yeah.
You're lucky. You're lucky. I still get called an asshole because I didn't care for the last Nas album.
Well, people call me an asshole for other records.
Oh, okay.
It's
Okay,
like,
just not that one.
That's the thing. If you're just constantly putting out new album reviews, people forget about your old negative ones and just hate you for the new negative ones. Yeah.
This is
Gotcha.
kind of.
Yeah, sure.
There's a news story I've been following that came out about a week ago that I think is relevant here because I think it is sort of proof that reviews do still matter in some regard. But there's I think it was the Baltimore City paper, I want to get this right, had published a really harsh live review of Jason Aldean, and
you guys know who that is?
He's a very, very famous country singer. Yes, it was in the Baltimore City paper, and basically, one of the main advertisers in the entertainment pages of their paper and on their website is Live Nation. They had presented the Jason Aldean show in Baltimore, and they basically, Live Nation came to the paper and said that they would like the review pulled from their website archives and from the paper. And it's a whole controversy. You can Google it. There's a lot to read about it, and a lot of people have been posting about it. But clearly, if one measly concert review that was a negative review of this guy could cause this much, of a harsh reaction from, up and down the food chain, I feel like reviews can still definitely ruffle feathers and cause things to happen.
I mean, at least in my personal experience, I don't know if this has ever happened with Dead End Hip Hop. I've never had this conversation with Myke before. Actually, this is the first time I've ever seen Myke in person. I know at least in my case, there have been a few negative reviews that I've done where on YouTube, I mean, it's sort of a unique platform in that any copyright holder for anything can essentially approach your video and say that there's a piece of their copyrighted content in it and have your video effectively taken down for a certain amount of time until YouTube sort of goes through the process of realizing that, oh, there's not actually any copyrighted content in here, and they're sort of banking on the fact that the person isn't going to fight back, or that, they'll sort of just forget about it and it'll be on the back burner in their head. And, I've had a Devo review taken down that had no audio clips in it whatsoever because the label was claiming that there are audio clips in the video when there wasn't. I've had a Neil Young review taken down that was a negative review.
Was the Devo one negative?
Yeah, I mean, it was lukewarm, but it did have a lot of negative points in it. And I've had a negative Neil Young review taken down as well, for pretty much for the same stuff. Some labels, because labels are the ones that are the most interested. I can't, I'm not saying that the artists were behind this plot or anything like that. But with labels anyway, that's their bottom line. And they're, sort of on the front lines of that stuff when it comes to,
I've never done that.
New record sales and stuff like that. And, sort of whether or not a negative review is up there. I mean, that could bug them, you know. I mean, even if it is a review, maybe they'll sleep easier at night if it doesn't exist.
It's like insecurity, man. I mean, a review's a review.
I can say that that has never, ever, ever happened to Dead in Hip Hop at all.
Yet.
I think rap dudes just don't think that way. They just threaten to fight you. They just tell you if you ever come to like
Slap the hair.
Loxahatchee, you're dead. So,
Do we gotta do Q&A?
Yes, yes, we are. We'd like to open it up right now for questions and answers.
you ask questions, we
Yeah.
answer them.
Oh, and he has a mic. so
Okay, here
raise
we
your
go.
hand, and
The
he'll
man in blue.
Raise your hand if you got a question.
Here it comes.
Hello, thank you for speaking to us today. My question is, or just I want your opinion or advice on, we live in a time where everyone's a rapper, and if you're a good artist, you know, it's hard to get your music to the forefront because you have to shift through all the crap. And I feel like that's the same thing for a writer for an album review sometimes. So what advice do you have to a writer to get through, you know, everyone's a critic now and all the other album reviews that are out there to make yourself more credible and people to actually read or watch your videos over album reviews that you're doing?
I think it's sort of a two-part process. I think the first part of it is finding your medium. I mean, I was doing album reviews that I thought were maybe not as good, but at least as honest and as searching through what I thought was good music via writing and via podcast. And it wasn't until that I went on YouTube that, you know, I actually started building my audience. I mean, I consider myself to be, you know, better talking publicly than I do writing. You know, I consider myself to have more presence in conversation than I do, you know, sort of typing out on my computer. But some people are better writers than me. And, you know, there are people who write album reviews. Maybe this is sort of a bad example because of how unprofessional in a sense they are, but the guy who does the big Ghostface reviews, you know, and sort of writes reviews in the voice of Ghostface Killah, and he's not really Ghostface Killah, his reviews are hilarious. But it's that sort of unique approach to finding whatever your voice is in your album review, how you would like to talk to your audience, that I think is important in being able to, you know, start that discussion and have an audience that wants to hear that discussion happen with you, and just finding that balance between reviewing major records that are relevant and also taking the time to turn music fans, readers, onto records that you think are worthwhile, that are sort of slipping under the radar. And, you know, the third part of it, just to add on to it, is patience. You know, nobody's going to blow up overnight doing an album review. You know, I've been doing the YouTube thing since 2009, and it's always only ever been a very gradual upward hike. Like, the bigger the channel has gotten, the wider those steps are that I take, but it's always just been very, you know, slow pace.
Your question?
Okay, right there. Oh, it's going back to the front. George Lucas.
Well, this goes back to the very beginning when you were talking about the relevancy of album reviews. I saw a panel this morning which was about music curation as far as streaming websites and such go. And they talked about tracks, they talked about playlists, they never ever talked about anybody even listening to albums anymore, at least not on streaming services. Do you think that's part of the problem with answering the question about whether album reviews are still relevant or not?
I think as far as an effective tool and people interested in album reviews, you know, honestly, when people talk about the downfall of the album in lieu of like playlists and singles and that sort of thing, I just have a hard time connecting with that argument, because I feel like back in the day, in the 80s, in the 90s, in the 70s, 60s, if people had the option to only listen to the songs that they wanted to, they would have taken it, you know? I mean, if people only wanted to listen to the hits, they would have. And they had avenues to do that too. Some people would only listen to the radio, some people would just buy the 45. You know, some people would just buy the record and then just listen to the 3, 4, 5 songs on it that they like over and over and over, and then just skip all the other tracks. I mean, I feel like album sales, while they have dropped over time, you know, just because album sales were higher back then, don't tell us whether or not anybody enjoyed any of those albums.
Right.
You know, there are tons of those albums, those CDs that people bought and they went directly in the garbage after, you know, or ended up in landfills, or you can find them at your local Goodwill sitting inside of a, you know, CD bucket. So Do I think album reviews are less relevant because people are more into playlists and singles and stuff like that? I mean, I feel like album reviewers should be conscious of that culture and indulge in it as well by sort of running a blog and stuff like that, where they're also endorsing new tracks. Because let's be completely honest, there are some genres that function better in terms of just singles than they do entire albums. Like house producers and stuff like that, or pop music artists. I mean, in terms of Lady Gaga, while I think her last record was one of her best, she's only really ever as strong as her singles a lot of the time, and I don't feel, I mean, it's just cold hard fact that her latest singles were not as hot as her singles off of the Fame Monster, so, I don't think it's necessarily a bad thing that things are moving that way, but I don't think it's hurting the art of the album review necessarily.
And I still think there's a lot of hardcore music fans who do listen to full albums all the way through.
Connoisseurs.
Yeah, I was definitely gonna say that. Like, that's something that I do consistently. Like, if I get in my car, I'm not gonna I don't skip around for an album. If I listen to an album and only 3/4 of it are actually good, 9 times out of 10, I just won't listen to the album.
Yeah.
I want a full project from somebody. If all you can do is produce singles, then I feel like you're in the wrong business. You should be in the background writing for somebody.
Jingles.
And then
Or
also,
writing
like, in my office, like every Monday and Tuesday, we kind of like scan the internet for full album streams, and we like to listen to the full album stream. Like, I go to the NPR, they have 33 or 40 records every week, and I usually just, even if it's something I've never heard of, then I will stream the full record there just to have something to listen to, and I usually play through the whole record. So I still think there's a lot of people doing that too.
Yeah, and I think the album as an art form and as a concept still has a lot of relevancy. I mean, for example, take Kendrick Lamar. I mean, if you rip the singles directly off of Good Kid, Mad City, you've got a handful of the weakest pop rap singles of the year, but as an album, that album is amazing. And I feel like the reason he's as popular as he is because Good Kid, Mad City sounds great as an album. Not just because one track has Drake on it, not just because one track has a really heavy trap beat on it, not just because one track is being misconstrued as a drinking song. It's because the whole thing sounds great as a record.
Next question.
Hey, how you doing? I'm starting a music publication that's launching this spring. It's going to focus on the music creation and the creative process. And I purposely, this topic is very interesting to me because I love the album review, I love the track review. Myself, I used to write for a blog where we did track reviews and concert reviews, but I'm making the actual decision not to do reviews with my publication. So that's the statement part of this. The question part of this is, when I go ahead and launch this thing, do you have any, as successful bloggers now, do you have any advice for me starting out as I do this?
With that model?
Well, the model is more editorial based. It's more based on
You're curating more than you are just giving your opinion all the time.
Exactly.
Yeah, I mean, that's completely fine. I mean, I have a website that I run in lieu of sort of doing the YouTube reviews, and the MP3 part of that website is really more of a place for me to just post stuff I like, and people are interested in that sort of voice too in the music world. I mean, I think one website that does that consistently is Stereo Gum. I mean, they don't do formal reviews of records all the time. I mean, they sort of do these premature evaluation posts where
That's the closest they get.
That's
to
the closest they get,
review.
and then they just sort of invite they'll write a little, few paragraphs about something that just leaked, and then they'll sort of invite everybody else's opinions about it in the comments. There are websites that I mean, Gorilla vs. Bear is another example. I mean, they hardly post anything in terms of an opinion. They're giving you the album cover, a release date, and then a stream of a song. I mean, there are successful.
Right.
I mean, there's successful websites that do that model, and there's different balances of reviews versus curation and so on and so forth. I mean, there's no wrong way to do it. We're just sort of saying that that album reviews as a model, we think will continue into the future.
Yeah. So you said you were posting about the creation of music. So that was what I heard. Now I want to make sure I heard you correctly.
Yeah,
so you're more so talking about how the music is made.
The work in progress is actually
Right.
where I'm going to spend my time. Like, for example, what I think is interesting is most of the, like what you guys do is say, hey, here's a finished piece of work. I'm going to talk about this finished piece of work. And, you know, to me, I think that's kind of been, well, now, like, been done. You know, you've got pitchforks, you've got all these sites that are reviewing. For me, I want to dive into the part where the innovation is happening, where the creation is happening, and write a little bit longer pieces about
I
that.
gotcha.
Right? I'm not talking about shortening and making anything brief. I'm actually talking expounding on the portion where the creation is happening.
I just want to make sure I understand.
Yeah.
Just because you must be a musician, because musicians make the absolute worst music critics. So, no, that's not a diss. It's true. If you're an artist, the last thing you want to do is judge somebody else's art. So that's what I was saying. That's why it makes sense.
Exactly. Yeah, I'd just like to really kind of dive into the process. Like,
Let's get to
talk
one more
about.
question.
Yeah.
One more. I think we got time for one more question.
We have, let me see, we have 3 minutes.
Yes, my name is Sean Massey from Houston, Texas. I was hoping y'all can spread the word. Starting this new company, a social media company.
Let's get a question in if we can. Are you going to ask a question?
No, I was hoping that you can spread the word. You all.
Yeah, come on, man. Let's get a question. And these
Get a
people have been
question.
standing here this whole time.
Got 3 minutes. Question.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
This is a legitimate question. So I would love to hear a little bit about like how you guys got your. So for me, I used to wait for my mail to come to read like Rolling Stone reviews and to see like what albums were coming out when I was little, to see like what I would want to go and buy. And then later on, you know, it started to shift, and I would still read reviews and I would still go to shows. And then now with the advent of Spotify, now a lot of the way I find new music is either by seeing what friends are listening to all day, and like I'm like, oh well, I trust that person's opinion, so I'm finding out that I'm curating more of the new music I'm listening to that way, and I'm reading less and less reviews. So I was wondering how that has affected you guys in your profession, or what kinds of things you yourself are now using to kind
You
of.
said you're reading less reviews. Do you watch reviews? Because I think that's really important to take into account. I don't read many reviews at all, but I'll be a lot more likely to watch a review simply because I feel like it's more of a dialogue, it's more of a conversation if somebody's actually talking to me about the album. So even though I don't know you, if you watch one of my videos, it might seem like I'm one of your friends just talking to you about why I think this album is good. Does that really make a difference at all?
No,
No?
not really.
Okay,
I would
fine.
I would rather get it from a friend or.
Okay.
No, I mean that's completely understandable, and I think it depends on what your music tastes are and what you're trying to get out of the music world. I mean, there are some people who, I mean, for me personally, I mean, I have friends on Spotify, and I go on Spotify as well, and Spotify recommends things to me, but I find the aggregation to be really predictable in terms of what it thinks I like. You know,
Well, I don't think-
sometimes the things that it recommends I hate, or it's recommending me things upon quotients that I would never want it to. Like, I remember I went on Spotify once and it said, Casey and JoJo's All My Life was really popular when you were a teenager. Why don't you, you're laughing because that
I
probably
love
happened to you.
those.
And then
So
and then
bad.
it said, why don't you play it? And while I did get like a dozen good jams out of that song, and after that happened, my girlfriend knows, you know, still, it's like, I want to be recommended something that's going to shock my world, you know what I mean? And to me, other people who are passionate about music and are reviewing artists that are underground and obscure, typically that's where that sensation comes from. You know, typically with my friends who don't dig into music as deeply as I do, and with these, you know, aggregators, like I said, the recommendations tend to be predictable, whereas with somebody who's human, there's more of a chaos factor. You know, they can recommend you something that the aggregators haven't even picked up yet.
Thank you to South by and all the hardworking volunteers.
Thank you, South by.